But open source doesn't exist in a vacuum, and I think our next presenter is going to be talking about this subject and how we might improve things. So, Doug Turnbull, for those of you who don't know, comes from Open Source Connections in the States, and is the author of this book, which you should all go and buy if you haven't already, because it's quite good, and regularly speaks and presents and talks at these events. So, no further ado, I'll hand over to Doug Turnbull.
So one small commercial is I'm doing some search relevance training in early July. Do please, if you go to the o19s.com, you can see that. So hope you'll join me there. So I'm going to talk about, Americans love hyperbole. If you haven't told, I can't tell by our current president. So I'm going to talk about, I think it's important to renew why we do open source. And usually I would come up here and talk about some interesting technical thing that I find inspiring. But what really inspires me is the idea of community, and I think it's important to revisit, not open source isn't the thing we do because it's free stuff. Open source is actually a specific business strategy that I think mid-sized companies really should embrace, and especially in the search field. And what I'm terrified of is this Amazon Sauron. It probably should be the board or the Empire or something. Is anyone here from Amazon? Okay. So, I mean, this is what we're all afraid of. One vendor to roll them all in one platform, bind them, right? Everything's just going to get sucked up into the board. And how many people have an Alexa strategy? Yeah, Amazon has an Alexa strategy. I can guarantee you that. But Amazon, Alexa, buy me Goofy Socks. And I think this quote, and for those of you who came to Haystack, much of this talk will look familiar, but this quote really stands out to me as when you decide, should I outsource the building of this thing to another firm? This is usually when it comes up, or should I really, my engineering team should really own it? And it's often presented in a binary context of, oh, we have this timesheet application. Everyone has a timesheet application. Of course, we're going to go buy Harvest or whatever product. We're not going to have a, 30-person team that works on the timesheet application. On the other hand, we have things like the reason we're here is because search is really core to our business, and we have to work on it in some fashion to get the value out of it. And so we're really in this middle area, actually. We have skin in the search game, and all the way on the left, and probably, Google, Amazon, whatever, almost, Amazon's storefront, basically search companies. On the far right, there's these Amazon merchants, people who use Shopify, and they're small merchants. They're not really interested in this platform or custom search. They have a couple dozen products, whatever. Shopify itself is very much in the middle because they care about this. But those of us, we're in this middle ground of like, this is important core value to us, and we have to own it to some extent. So what I like to think is to own this, we really need freedom. We have to control our destiny, and I won't try to scream because that will break out the speakers. And when you think about this, if you break up the different levels of this, level of maturity, people at this end, they really need complete customization. They need certain licensing over the code. That basically means that no one's going to take it away from them. But their mind share is static. So if these are sort of three things I think about when we're getting a solution, how much can we customize it? Whether or not the code is going to come out from under us, and how can we hire people, to work on this stuff. At Amazon, they probably have a custom to the hilt thing. Their mind shares the people that work on Amazon, the people, maybe 1,000 people. Licensing, no one's going to take the code away. It's very certain customization. We can completely customize it. Yeah, and that's basically what these things mean. Does anyone know what the bus, I don't know if this is an American thing, the bus factor? Basically, like, if you have a bus factor of 1, if a bus hits that person, you have no no more capability in that area. So kind of a gruesome thing. Customization. In the middle here, we need some customization, not tremendous customization down to the index level usually. We need some level of certain licensing, and we hope to have a broad community mindshare where we can seek out help and support and that sort of thing. Because we're only customizing part of it, this broad community helps us fill in the gaps of what we don't have, right? And that's really what we need, those of us in this group need, right? The average, this time it's a Shopify merchant, doesn't, who cares? This is a thought that does not enter their head. And these are the resource constraints we work with. The reason that the real business cases, most of us, I think the larger end of here has tens of people in their search team. And then Amazon, who knows, hundreds, thousands of people on their search team. They've got like search armies roving through the halls, ransacking snack drawers, looking for anything to do to customize to get 0.001% performance out. And then, they're just one merchant down there. So we're all operating in this basically resource-constrained environments with requirements where we need some level of customization. We don't want the code taken out from under us. And we need to be able to reach out to a community when we think of our tools and that sort of thing to get help. The value is still there, but we are resource-constrained in our ability to do it. I think this got dragged somewhere in there. So ignore that crazy thing. Empowerment. So we talked about freedom. Freedom is very much about having the ability to take control of our stack and customize it to what we need. Empowerment is actually, does whatever product or open source tooling give us the things we actually need to do our job? And, this is my son, Ian, and I like this quote, always be yourself unless you can be Batman, then always be Batman. So I hope you guys can be Batman. He loved that jacket. We traveled Scotland and he wore that all over the place. It was adorable. So, and this is the problem. If we don't have good tools to do our job, we have a stick and a suction cup. Imagine we're plumbers, right? Plumbing, at some point, and there's the Wikipedia article on plungers is fascinating, I guarantee it. At some point, we are all plumbers, and there's this new initiative called toilets, and so we realize we have to plunge toilets. And so we just have these suction cups and sticks, and we're putting things together. And we're doing a lot of work, repeat work, where everyone in our community of plumbers is reinventing the plunger over and over again. So it wastes a lot of our time when we don't actually have the tools we need to do our job. But over here, when we can take away some of these repeat works that occur sort of in our guild, in our discipline of practice, we can focus more on fewer of the mundane repeat tasks and get to the secret sauce a lot faster. And notice that secret sauce is fatter than that secret sauce because we can really focus on what makes our experience special. We get faster time to market, more opportunity to differentiate. And I've seen this so many times where working across, as a consultant in search relevance, working across fields, seeing things like search analytics reinvented over and over again, becoming a 6-month project, and then getting mired and lost behind the competition. So really our goal is, here's our plumber that is not Mario, I'll have you know Nintendo. And you can imagine we go through this process of commoditizing tools that are important to our business. Things that we don't want to have to keep reinventing. And that is the case of the plunger. And you can see this actually happening in search. So learning to rank building blocks. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, learning to rank was a pretty, I think a couple people were doing it, maybe a bit esoteric, not nearly as, not something everyone was asking about. In 2010, Lambda Mart won a Microsoft competition came about. No one really knew much about it. Occasionally you would see sort of these independent search teams taking lambda mart and re-ranking search results outside of the search engine, for example, or doing some basic things to do learning to rank, very one-off things. And you would see these teams continually reinventing these things. But now there is a lot of infrastructure in Solr and Elasticsearch that lets you take it. You can take advantage of this and get the learning to rank solution to market faster. And I really like the Get Your Guide talk today because you can see how, we try something, we iterate, we can fail. The farther we get to our tools being commodity, the more we can fail fast and get into a hypothesis-driven mode of trying out new things and getting closer to our secret sauce. So there's really two ways, I think, I sort of think of this as a problem. And when I think of this problem and how we're resource constrained as mid-sized companies, I see sort of two paths one could take. And you can guess where my biases are based on the name of my company. But I do want to say that I think the product companies, I think, can innovate faster. They have a very specific focus. They tend to be a lot more turnkey. But of course, you have less freedom and mindshare. Your community is really the owners, the other developers, a user community. So it's like being in the Microsoft user community or something like that. Open source, there's sort of in some ways, open source innovates slower, but there's a broader focus. There's not necessarily a focus on, say, e-commerce or on enterprise search and building really amazing tooling just for that problem. But you have a lot more freedom. You have mind share, you can hire more people that work on this stuff, license accessibility, so forth. IP is freer. And I think, I think there are pros and cons, but one thing I think about, I notice a lot in my organizations that tend to become dependent on a product is some of these, we were talking about less freedom, but some of these points that I've noticed. Product companies can tend to be acquired or go away over time, and what may be the hot product now may be the thing that goes away in a couple of years. So it's always something you have to think about. A lot of products are very reliant on sort of very hard to manage black box machine learning that you can't have access to. That's very much the proprietary secret sauce of that product. And this isn't all product companies, but this is many product companies increasingly that have this sort of marketing around them. And when there's something broken in the search engine, you're not allowed to question the almighty cognitive search engine, human models. And the other thing I've noticed as a consultant is in search specifically, product companies tend to require, still especially for people who would be in this room that really care about the quality of their search, tend to have a lot of professional services that need to come along with the product to get things customized for that domain. So not only are you dependent on the product, you may be dependent on a very custom flavor of that product for what you're doing. However, open source is not all beds of roses, right? Open source, in say 2010, we used to be able to do this. If we were to have, I don't think we would have had a MICES in 2010 for people using Solr, or it'd be like the Endeca people would be happy and the Solr people would be like, whatever, we still have Solr index and data, we put a UI in front of it and we're done. And I still, to this day, if you go to like DrupalCon or something and they compare the MySQL search to the Solr search, and you try to tell them about relevance that's even beyond stock Solr search, they will look at you funny because they are so happy that they have TF-IDF now, or these things. They're just like floored that it's so relevant now. And it's very much, they're not us, they're not thinking at this depth. So it used to be, this was my company, our projects, this was our projects back then, right? And today, 2018, our stack hasn't changed too much. We still have the same open source search engines. I'm really glad that today we have some open open source analytics potentially to use. We have some learning to rank, but still the out-of-the-box open source really hasn't caught up to meet today's problems. And this is what, if you can go through, I mean, is modern search really 10 hot links? Or is it this really in-depth query understanding? I doubt he really invented the taco. But anyway, is modern search, that's like Sluther, lexical? Or is it, I think we saw a good example of this in the last talk, you know, are we all gonna manage that misspelling or synonym? Is a fuzzy matching gonna get that at all? You know, this is actually probably a great application of deep learning. Is modern relevance knobs and dials? Or is it taking all these analytics, shoving them, turning them to judgments, training a learning to rank model, and iterating over and over again? And these are the gaps, for those of us who work in open source, that we see in our space that we're really frustrated with. You get this thing, but you really need this kind of system with enrichment and learning and a searching system and probably other things for your specific domain. And many of these pieces are missing for most of us, and we end up building plungers from sticks and suction cups over and over again. So we end up wasting a lot of time and effort. So yeah, all of these things are things that I notice all the time, my clients across not just e-commerce, but across all kinds of industries, from job search to enterprise search to all kinds of stuff. We're always reinventing this stuff, and it feels kind of frustrating. Like intent classification, just to pick one out, I won't go through all of these, but I feel like intent classification comes up a lot, and it feels like there could almost be an NLP subfield of understanding queries that has yet to be born, that could really feed into how do we classify an intent into categories, into topics, and that sort of thing. So these are all things that everyone really has to build, and I really question, like, are the tools that we have in open source really up to the task? And this is a frustration because I believe in open source, but open source is definitely not really necessarily empowering us right now. Well, up until MICES, I should say, really like maintaining and keeping an e-commerce community across all of our companies means we're reinventing the wheel over and over and over again. Or it means we're becoming dependent on product vendors to do all this stuff for us. And one thing I want to point out, and this is one of the reasons that I'm doing training, by the way, is to build, we need to get beyond the technology to techniques and strategies. So I'm really happy about the talks today because they've been extremely substantive and helping share how people are actually solving these problems. So my call to action, and this is sort of, we're in East Germany, so I have to have this kind of symbolism. But this is my call to action: is that we should really unite. We really need to unite as a community. And I have some American symbology to balance it all out. We really need to join, or mid-sized companies like the companies you guys work at are gonna, suffer because Amazon is gonna keep getting farther and farther ahead. And unless we as a community are more open to share basic practices and tools that we use and open source different things, we're not going to make progress against the big guy that's far out there way in front. And I'm sure we all have, especially developers who think they've done something cool and they want to open source it. There's kind of a there's probably some game theory thing or something, but there's some, locally in our businesses we have there's sort of an immediate knee-jerk reaction to not open source, not open up data, not open up not open up code, not open up models, techniques. There tends to be a, well, we really got that, get that approved by 10 layers of legal, and no, we can't do that, we're a little bit hesitant. Companies are very risk averse. One thing that's really missing out there, for example, is there's no really good open data set with labeled queries and judgments that has labeled documents, labeled judgments with query logs and a full corpus that lets people experiment with like learning to rank approaches. That doesn't exist really. There's a couple out there, but they have very complicated licensing, so you can't really just use them on your own. So that's kind of another area that someone could contribute and add a lot of value to the community. So us, if we see each other solely as a zero-sum game in terms of competition, what we're going to end up doing is wasting a lot of time getting bogged farther and farther behind the leaders in the front. And because we're reinventing and wasting our even more limited resources on reinventing plungers and wrenches and things, when Amazon's out there with jackhammers and like, I don't know, robo plunger robots that can plunge toilets an hour or something. So that's what I want you guys to think about when you're thinking about open source. So open source is great, and I think it's honestly the best path forward for organizations to move forward, but it's challenging. It's challenging and requires organizational commitment from different people. It's not just a free-for-all. So this is baby open source. One of the challenges is not just what happens when finally we get approval to open source something, but one question is, what happens when we have our baby open source project? Here's that Zalando deep learning cool stuff that I'm sure you guys will open source, right?
It's already open source.
Oh, cool. Okay, so here is a slightly larger turtle. We wanted to keep going forward, but open source comes with many threats. And one of the things I want us to think about is, as a community, how do we form connections in open source? So, if only someone would build these connections in open source. How do we work together as a community to get this all working together? Instead of all of us building this roundy-rolly thing, we have a community and we're working together, and hopefully we have a nice windmill that we've all worked on together. So, and this is really our company's mission, where in 10 years we don't want there to be 5 giant tech companies in the world with Amazon being the only e-commerce company. We really want to empower other search teams, and a big part of that is we feel like making open source more capable and more able to actually serve the needs of the search relevance, and the e-commerce community, that will be ultimately in the better service of the world, and not concentrate all the power in one big player. So we've got to figure this out, and there's a lot of things that I think are important when you have an open source project. Who can you partner with to fund and build it? Are there people in this room that you could sort of work together? What are the things that need to be reinvented? One big thing that comes up a lot, especially in the bottom, and this came up when we helped with the Elasticsearch wanting to rank plugin, is quite often if your organization has something they want to open source, it's often a good idea to try to figure out other players in the room, to figure out what can we do to have a product vision for that in a way that's going to increase adoption. And as that increases adoption, it takes more burden and more cost away from our organization and helps share it around. And I've seen that myself with the Elasticsearch wanting to rank plugin. More people, we got a pull request from Yelp, probably add that person as a main contributor. And I think when you guys release open source, just think about that. I think maybe I can scratch that top one off. Maybe. We at least got a big important piece of it. But in open source, especially in e-commerce, we have a lot of gaps here. Standard ways of interpreting using clickstream, merchandising tools. Product diversity and serendipity is a big deal in relevance, or in e-commerce relevance, not just relevance. All of our search engines are very much biased towards if you search for red balloon, we're going to show you the same kind of red balloon 200 times, not variants on that. And things in e-commerce practicing, I think Renee covered all of these things in depth. So we hope that you will, we of course would like partners and would like to help organizations develop open source. But I also hope that you guys will find partners in each other to develop open source, and that we can all work together as a community. In addition to the e-commerce community, we have a search relevance Slack community that is a great place to come if you do a lot of relevance work. There's people from Wikimedia, Yelp, all kinds of big companies in there, all working on relevance work that can chat, talk about conferences, projects. I'm there if you want to chat with me. So I hope you'll come join us on the Slack channel. And that's about it. Thanks.